Children that have quite literally been shocked into silence. Parents cannot keep them safe, cannot feed them.
Gazans voted for Hamas. They support Hamas.
I want to jump into a CNN interview with a journalist who has been on the ground in Gaza covering the further onslaught of Palestinians still being carried out by the IDF. So take a moment if you can first to leave us a like on the video, helps us out a bunch in the algorithm, gives the video a big boost, and let's see what context we can add.
We've seen different kinds of ways that this sort of, deep, intense trauma manifests in a child. And I think the starkest and best way to describe it is when you meet and see children that have quite literally been shocked into silence. So children go nonverbal. They are unable to process what it is that they're seeing, and coupled with the reality that the security blanket that a child would normally turn to, their parents, for protection, they know that doesn't exist. A child knows their parents cannot keep them safe, cannot feed them, cannot make their pain go away. And so you have these multiple traumas that are constantly hitting them all the time. And then add to that just the daily struggle of trying to stay alive.
And this is why just intuitively, even what the IDF and Netanyahu's strategy is of just ruthless slaughter and carpet bombing of Gaza until Hamas is eradicated just makes little sense when you are in these conditions, specifically put in these conditions. They're being inflicted upon you by a specific entity. You're just going to grow to hate that entity. It keeps the ideology alive. And to me, I find it kind of wild how the argument seems to be, well, we can hope for the best case scenario, which is an entire generation of Palestinian children given severe PTSD, anxiety, depression, and more, fighting severe food insecurity and the threat of famine, probably ethnically cleansed from their homes, but well, they won't retaliate, so all the Israeli children are safe. Like, do we not see the imbalance here?
What does Gaza look like when you go in there? What are you seeing?
It feels as if you're sort of in the opening scenes of some sort of bizarre apocalyptic Hollywood zombie movie. But then you realize in the middle of all of this, utterly dystopian scenery, people are actually trying to live in and among the rubble. There's little children who aren't wearing shoes, who are lugging, gallons of water that are heavier than they are. There's this one horrible scene of a father who's trying to push, his son in a wheelchair, and he just completely collapses from exhaustion. You have the elderly that are trying to crawl along because they don't have any other means of transportation. And it is so hard to comprehend how people are actually surviving. And there's one thing, Fareed, that I really wish everybody could see and understand is the level of kindness and compassion and humanity that still exists among so many.
This is where it really gets crazy for me, how a lot of people sit in a very privileged position in this conversation in America or many places abroad where the threat of this ever happening to them, their homes, their family is literally zero, to the level they couldn't possibly fathom the day-to-day thoughts and livelihood that these people are going through. Yet they still want to opine and label them all barbaric terrorists who deserve these horrendous conditions that are being inflicted upon them for one reason or the other, where it is important to stress this only escalated after October the 7th. It didn't start then. Even per the ICJ, Gaza has been under occupation and apartheid since 1967. So even if you want to go with the horrendous argument that October the 7th justifies it all, which it doesn't justify genocide, you would still then have to justify the apartheid before then.
Gazans voted for Hamas. They support Hamas. They celebrated after October 7th. What's your sense?
So if we look at a poll that was done by the Arab Barometer, actually incidentally just before October 7th, they found that if there in fact had been elections, the Hamas candidate would have gotten less than 25% of the vote. Add to that, Gaza's population is extremely young. So the vast majority of Gazans, more than 50%, were not even born or old enough to vote when Hamas came into power. Let's also remember that before October 7th, twice Gazans tried to rise up against Hamas and were unable to do so. And even if we look at the videos that came out, and I understand, it horrific. The scenes of, the hostages being pulled into Gaza and people around there celebrating, even if we're generous and say, how many people were in those videos? 5,000, let's call it 10,000, let's even call it 20,000. That's 1% of the population. I have not, in my 4 trips to Gaza, heard a single person support Hamas.
This is one of those talking points that was never really true, but if enough people say something, it becomes factual by popular belief. I've on numerous occasions spoken to numerous doctors on this channel, the interviews for anyone to find, that have been on the ground in hospitals in Gaza. None of them have ever witnessed Hamas in hospitals. And even outside of like doctors I've spoken to, there's never to this day been a doctor who has came forward and said, I've seen Hamas in the hospitals. As she stated, a poll conducted right before October the 7th showed that the population would have voted Hamas out of power. The median age has the majority of the population far too young to have even voted or probably been alive when Hamas was elected. And we know for an absolute fact, Netanyahu himself funneled money through Qatar to specifically prop up Hamas and get them elected or help them get elected because he felt the PLO posed a bigger threat in terms of Palestinian sovereignty being recognized. It's literally also just the same old racist bullshit being recycled, like, oh, all Arabs are terrorists and all Muslims are terrorists. It's incredibly juvenile and offensive thinking that has unfortunately perverted American dialogue and discourse since 9/11, and it's back in the forefront once this was escalated, where now it's normal for people to pretend that like children are just future terrorists and babies deserve it and grandmas deserve it because Hamas.